I know this is a bit late, but I wanted to take a closer look at Daxter since it's finally been made available outside of the PSP and the Vita for the first time. This game, along with many PSP titles, have been slowly getting ports to PS4 and PS5 as of late through the PlayStation Plus Premium tier. I also want to remind you that these games are available to purchase digitally as standalone games, and I really want to stress that if you have a working Vita or PlayStation 3, many of these ported classic PlayStation games are cross-buy with these new ports, and in most cases these titles are still available on those original systems for lower prices than what's shown on PS5 or PS4 if you're looking to buy these games outright. You can use a website like PlayStation Deals to quickly check if these classic ports are still listed for these older systems, and you can check the prices. For example, Daxter is $7.99 USD if you buy the PSP version on a Vita or a PS3, but it's $9.99 USD if you buy it on a PS4 or a PS5. Either way, you'll get the new version, but cheaper is always better, right? With that out of the way, let's take a closer look at how well this PSP emulation runs on the PS5. So it needs to be stressed that this is the original PSP game running on an emulator on the PS5 and PS4, so there's only so much that emulators are able to do. For example, let's start with the cutscenes. These are exactly the same as they were on the PSP, which had a resolution of 480 by 272 pixels. So these cutscenes are pre-rendered and they look exactly the same as they did on the PSP. Maybe there's a little bit of upscaling that the PS5 can do, but it's really exactly as it was in the original game. What emulation can do is improve resolution with 3D stuff that's rendered live as you play, but you'll notice that the 2D graphics like the UI and stuff looks quite low resolution. That's because all of the images and whatnot that are used in the UI are as they were in the original PSP version, which was developed for that small screen, and as a result looks quite pixelated on the PS5. The great part is that all the 3D stuff and the main gameplay of the screen is seemingly rendered in 4K or at least 1080p. It looks really great. I'm surprised at how well all the textures and models hold up in this game. Unfortunately, the frame rate is also locked to the original 30 FPS. They couldn't do a frame rate increase. Sometimes that's challenging in emulation because games have in-game stuff that is tied to the frame rate of the game. So if the game is sped up to 60 FPS, a lot of things in the game will just run twice as fast and the game will be unplayable or just not work in certain ways. I think some PSP ports to PS5 have had 60 FPS patch, but I did a little bit of research, and even with the best PSP emulators out there on PC, even you can't get Daxter running at 60 FPS natively. So yeah, the game clock is definitely tied to the frame rate in this case, and that's why we don't see a frame rate improvement on the PS5 version. But at least that way you know that this is as good as it gets pretty much, unless you're using some sort of external frame generation tool, which are still a pretty new thing in the PC space. Some other great things about this PS5 port is the controls are improved for the PS5. In the original PSP, there is no right analog stick, so the camera controls were mapped to the trigger buttons. It's kind of a challenging way to move the camera, but by default, they were nice enough to map the triggers to the right stick of the PS5 controller as well. And all the controls are fully remappable in this PS5, PS4 version of Daxter, so you can totally move that around if you want to. You can apply new controls to the triggers if you wanted to. So that's all very convenient and a welcome benefit of playing the new version of the game. The other new features that you get on the PS5 version is of course the rewind and save states. Those are really awesome because if you want to, it's totally optional. You can just rewind the game if you mess up on a really easy part. It's just a platforming game, so you know what you're gonna get. If you didn't quite make a jump or you missed a few collectibles, you can always just rewind a few seconds and then try again. And that's totally up to you. If you don't want to use it, you don't think it's hardcore if you use a rewind feature, but I think it's an awesome feature to have on old games if someone's just trying to catch up on the backlog and get a feel for the whole Jak and Daxter series. They just want to go back and play through them all, get to know the story, get to know what's going on. The rewind feature makes it really convenient and a lot easier to get through these games. Maybe this isn't the best example, but some games are quite challenging and the old controls maybe don't hold up so well, and rewind features make the games that much more accessible to newer audiences. And then lastly, the best feature about all of these new PS5 classic ports is trophy support, because PSP games especially and PS1, PS2 games that have started coming out they never had trophies. So we're finally getting trophy support, and you can finally get platinums for classic PlayStation games. So I managed to get the platinum for Daxter already, and I'm gonna try working through the platinums of all of the Jak and Daxter series now that they all have platinums. And I just think that's an awesome feature and gives people a really good reason to go replay their favorite games. They can try and get the platinum and prove that they are big fans. Definitely gives you a fun reason to revisit all these older and your favorite games on the new platforms if they port them. Overall, it's much better than the PS2 emulation that just came out on PS5, and probably as good as it gets with straight emulation of a PSP game. If you're curious about the issues with the PS2 emulator, you can go check out my video all about that. But that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And let me know what you think of all these emulated PlayStation classics on the PS5 and what you're hoping will be ported over next.